For 3 months, I watched my mother-in-law die of cancer in our guest house. Except she wasn't dying at all. I noticed it first in small things: her hair too thick, her appetite too healthy, her energy too abundant on days my husband wasn't home. Then I found the medicine bottles, not chemotherapy drugs, but something else entirely. "Just keep playing the dying act and we'll have their house by Christmas," I overheard her tell her lover on the phone, not knowing I was listening. My husband thought I was paranoid, unstable, even cruel to question his mother's illness. He never saw how she smiled when his back was turned, how methodically she was dismantling our marriage, our finances, our future. By the time I discovered she was drugging my evening tea, James had already torn up our prenup and called a lawyer about having me committed. People always underestimate what a desperate woman will do to save herself. They forget that cornered prey fights hardest. My mother-in-law thought she was the predator in our home. She was about to discover how dangerously wrong she was. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The phone rang just after midnight. I fumbled for it in the darkness. My husband James still sound asleep beside me. "Hello?" I mumbled, pushing my blonde hair from my face. "Emily?" The voice on the other end was barely recognizable through the sobs. "It's Elaine." My mother-in-law rarely called me directly. James and I had been married for nearly 10 years, and in that time, Elaine had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with me. "What's wrong?" I sat up, suddenly alert. It's cancer." Her voice broke. "Stage 4 pancreatic. The doctors say 6 months." I woke James immediately. His face crumpled as I relayed the news, and I watched my strong, confident husband dissolve into tears. Without hesitation, I suggested what seemed like the only reasonable option. "She should come stay with us," I said, rubbing his back. "The cancer center here is one of the best in the country. We have the guest house. She shouldn't be alone through this." James looked at me with such gratitude that any reservations I might have had dissolved instantly. "You'd do that for her? For us?" "Of course," I said. "We're family." 3 days later, I stood in our driveway as James helped his mother from the car. Elaine was a striking woman at 62, with carefully maintained ash blonde hair and the same piercing blue eyes as my husband. I'd always admired how she carried herself with dignified elegance, even now, supposedly facing a terminal diagnosis. What I hadn't expected was the amount of luggage. "Mom, let me get that," James said, struggling with the third large suitcase. "From the trunk." "I wasn't sure how long I'd be staying," Elaine explained, noticing my expression. "And I didn't know what I'd need for treatment." I nodded sympathetically, but something nagged at me as I helped carry a designer bag still bearing a price tag into the guest house. Who shops for new clothes when they've just been given months to live? "I think I'll rest now," Elaine said once we'd brought everything in. The drive was exhausting. "Of course," I replied. "I've taken the week off work to help you get settled. Your first appointment is tomorrow at 10. I'll drive you." "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "James can take me." "James has an important meeting tomorrow with potential clients. This project could put his firm on the national map." I smiled reassuringly. "I don't mind at all." Elaine's lips tightened momentarily before relaxing into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How thoughtful of you, Emily." The next morning, I drove Elaine to the cancer center, stealing glances at her as she gazed out the window. For someone with advanced pancreatic cancer, she looked remarkably healthy. Her skin had a rosy glow and she'd eaten a hearty breakfast. When I mentioned this, she explained that the real symptoms hadn't kicked in yet. At the center, I was surprised when the receptionist didn't immediately recognize Elaine, despite her claiming to have had several consultations already. The oncologist, Dr. Williams, seemed oddly casual about her condition. with none of the gravity I'd expect when discussing a terminal prognosis. When I tried to accompany Elaine into the consultation room, she placed a manicured hand on my arm. I'd prefer to go in alone. It's difficult having too many people hear about my private medical matters. I respected her wishes and waited in the lobby, leafing through magazines and watching other patients, many visibly ill, come and go. After an unusually short 40 minutes, Elaine emerged looking completely unfazed. "That was quick," I commented. "Just a consultation about the treatment plan," she said vaguely. "The actual chemotherapy starts next week." As the days passed, I noticed more inconsistencies. One evening, I found medication bottles in the bathroom and, curious, looked them up online. They weren't chemotherapy drugs, but mild anti-nausea medication and vitamin supplements. When I casually mentioned this to Elaine, she became defensive. "They're supplemental treatments," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "The actual chemotherapy is administered at the center. These just help manage side effects." "Of course," I said, retreating. "I just want to make sure you're getting the best care." Meanwhile, James was becoming increasingly distracted at work. His business partner, Martin, called one evening while James was helping Elaine. "Emily, I'm worried," Martin said. "James missed the presentation for the Thompson account today. That's $50 million potentially walking out the door." "No," I sighed. "It's difficult with his mother's condition." "I understand, but this firm is his dream. Everything we've worked for is at stake." Our 10th wedding anniversary arrived 2 weeks after Elaine moved in. We'd been planning a trip to Paris for years, saving carefully and dreaming of walking along the Seine. "I can't go," James said the night before our departure. "Mom might not have many special days left. I can't be thousands of miles away if something happens." I swallowed my disappointment. "We can reschedule. Paris will still be there. But would our marriage?" I wondered silently. Already, I felt Elaine's presence wedging between us like a slowly inserted knife. The changes to our home began subtly. First, it was just Elaine rearranging the guest house to her liking. Then she started suggesting changes to our main house. "These curtains are so dark," she commented one morning at breakfast. "The heavy fabric traps dust that triggers my nausea. Perhaps something lighter?" Before I knew it, our navy drapes had been replaced with pale blue ones Elaine had ordered. Then it was the throw pillows, the dining chairs, even the scented candles I loved. All gradually replaced because they supposedly aggravated her symptoms. When I finally objected to her replacing the artwork in our living room, James took me aside, his face tense with anger. "If changing a few paintings helps my dying mother, what's the problem? Why are you being so selfish?" The word stung. Was I being selfish? Was my discomfort more important than a dying woman's peace of mind? My doubts multiplied when we attended a neighborhood barbecue, and I met Dr. Catherine Lynn, a new neighbor who mentioned she worked at the cancer center where Elaine received treatment. Pancreatic cancer? Dr. Lynn frowned when I mentioned my mother-in-law's condition. Stage 4? That's unusual. Patients at that stage typically show more pronounced physical symptoms: significant weight loss, jaundice, extreme fatigue. "She has good days and bad days," I said defensively, though I couldn't recall witnessing any particularly bad days. Later that week, my childhood friend Rebecca visited for lunch. After meeting Elaine briefly, she pulled me into the kitchen with a concerned expression. "Something seems off," she whispered. "I lost my dad to pancreatic cancer last year. Either your mother-in-law has the mildest case in medical history, or something's not adding up." I brushed off Rebecca's concerns, but her words lingered. That night, I found myself watching Elaine across the dinner table, noting her healthy appetite and the animated way she described a book she'd been reading. 3 months into her supposed terminal diagnosis, and she appeared more vibrant than ever. 3 months after Elaine moved in, I stood in our kitchen preparing coffee and watching her through the window as she tended to the roses in our garden. Her movements were fluid and energetic, showing no signs of the fatigue or weakness typical of someone undergoing aggressive chemotherapy. In fact, she'd gained weight since arriving, her face fuller than before, with a healthy glow to her skin. When James came downstairs, I casually mentioned this as a positive sign. "The treatments must be working better than expected," I said, handing him his coffee. "Your mom seems stronger than when she arrived." For a moment, James looked confused, as if this observation didn't align with his understanding of the situation. Then he quickly nodded. "Yes, the doctor said she's responding well. It's unexpected." His hesitation was subtle but noticeable. For the first time, I wondered if James had doubts of his own that he was suppressing. Later that week, while gathering laundry, I found receipts in Elaine's jacket pocket. One for a spa day, including a hot stone massage and seaweed wrap, and another for a shopping trip to an exclusive boutique downtown. Both were dated for days when she'd told us she was too weak from chemotherapy to leave her room. The next day, I casually mentioned the new boutique near the cancer center while driving Elaine to her appointment. "Oh, Bella's," she responded enthusiastically. "Their spring collection is divine. I found the most beautiful cashmere sweater there last week, the pale blue one I was wearing yesterday." I kept my expression neutral as I processed this slip. Elaine had told us she'd ordered that sweater online during a midnight bout of insomnia. That evening, I was up late finishing work when I overheard Elaine on the phone in the garden. Her voice, usually careful and measured around James and me, was animated and carefree. "The Mediterranean cruise looks perfect," she was saying. "Once this whole thing blows over, I deserve some luxury. You should see how they fawn over me here. It's almost too easy." When she noticed me by the kitchen window, she quickly hung up. The next morning, she explained she'd been speaking to a cancer survivor friend about future dreams that helped keep her spirits up during treatment. Our finances were the next red flag. James and I had always been careful with money, saving diligently for retirement and future plans. But checking our accounts, I discovered large withdrawals, $15,000 here, $20,000 there, all for what James explained were experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. "But shouldn't we get a second opinion before spending our life savings?" I asked during a rare moment alone with him. "What if there are other options?" "A second opinion?" James's face hardened. "You think the doctors don't know what they're doing? Or is it that you don't want to spend the money on my mother?" Later, I overheard Elaine crying to James. "She wants me to die faster to save money," she sobbed. "I always knew she resented me, but this..." The division between us deepened. James began spending nights in the guest room adjacent to his mother's, claiming my restlessness kept him awake. In reality, I knew he was positioning himself to be available for Elaine's middle-of-the-night calls for assistance she somehow never needed when James was at work, and I was the only one home. One afternoon, while searching for a missing earring, I found a strange key in our laundry room that didn't match any lock in our house. That same week, I noticed Elaine making secretive trips in her car. When I asked where she'd gone, she mentioned support group meetings, but I'd seen her heading in the opposite direction of the hospital. Curious, I followed her one day and watched her enter a storage facility on the outskirts of town. She spent nearly an hour inside before emerging with a small package that she carefully placed in her trunk. The family dinner where I met Elaine's brother, Robert, provided another piece of the puzzle. Robert hadn't seen Elaine since before her diagnosis and seemed genuinely shocked by her appearance. Not because she looked ill, but because she didn't. "You look better than the last time I saw you, before the diagnosis," he remarked, studying her face. "Whatever they're giving you, it's working miracles." Elaine laughed too loudly and quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation toward Robert's children. Later, I overheard her telling James that Robert was in denial about her illness, and that they shouldn't invite him again as it was too painful. The nanny cam was my husband's idea, ironically. Concerned that our housekeeper might be stealing small items that had gone missing, James purchased a camera disguised as a coffee maker for the kitchen. He forgot about it after the housekeeper quit, but I remembered. Reviewing the footage one afternoon while both James and Elaine were out, I watched in disbelief as Elaine, who'd claimed to be too nauseated to join us for breakfast, entered the kitchen after we left. She took her morning medication from the cabinet, dumped the pills down the garbage disposal, then opened a bottle of expensive red wine and poured herself a generous glass, alcohol strictly forbidden with her supposed medication. That night, as I lay awake beside a snoring James, I made a mental catalog of all the inconsistencies: the lack of symptoms, the secret phone calls, the missing valuables, the extraordinary medical expenses with no visible treatment effects. Either Elaine had the most miraculous case of pancreatic cancer in medical history, or something sinister was unfolding in our home. The breaking point came when I returned early from work to find Elaine in my closet, trying on my clothes and jewelry. My grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom, was around her neck, and she was admiring herself in my full-length mirror. "What are you doing?" I demanded from the doorway. Elaine startled, but quickly recovered. "Emily, I didn't hear you. Come in." She fingered the pearls. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to feel beautiful again before—" On cue, tears welled in her eyes. "When you know you're dying, the small pleasures become so important." James walked in at that moment, taking in the scene. His mother in tears, me standing rigidly in apparent outrage. "What's going on?" he asked, immediately moving to Elaine's side. "It's nothing," Elaine said, removing the necklace with trembling hands. I shouldn't have touched Emily's things without asking. It was thoughtless of me. "Keep it," I said, my voice flat. "It looks better on you anyway." James followed me into the hallway. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed. "She's dying, and you're worried about jewelry?" I bit back my retort, realizing I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. Not yet. Not without proof. That night, James came to bed late and lay beside me in silence for a long time before speaking. "I'm seeing a therapist," he finally admitted, his voice small in the darkness. "I'm terrified of losing her, Em. I don't know how to prepare for a world without my mother in it." His vulnerability pierced my anger. I reached for his hand, feeling the familiar calluses on his fingers from years of drafting architectural plans. "I'm here for you," I said softly, wondering if I was the one losing perspective. Was I becoming paranoid, searching for deception where there was only illness? But the next day, I noticed my grandmother's pearls were missing from Elaine's dresser where I'd seen her place them. They were no longer in my jewelry box either. I took a personal day off work without telling James. After he left for a client meeting, I watched from our bedroom window as Elaine emerged from the guest house dressed immaculately in a cream-colored pantsuit, a far cry from the comfortable loungewear she typically wore on chemotherapy days. She checked her reflection. In her car window, applied a fresh coat of lipstick and drove away with purpose. I gave her a 5-minute head start before following in my own car, maintaining a careful distance. Instead of heading toward the cancer center, Elaine drove downtown, eventually pulling into the valet parking of the Westbrook, a luxury hotel, known for its discretion and eye-watering room rates. I parked across the street and waited, watching as she greeted the doorman with the confidence of a regular guest. After a few minutes' deliberation, I crossed the street and entered the lobby. Scanning for Elaine, I spotted her by the elevators, embracing a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. She reached up and kissed him passionately, lingering in a way that spoke of long intimacy. My hands trembled as I raised my phone and snapped several photos from behind a large potted plant. The couple moved toward the hotel restaurant, and on impulse I followed, requesting a table with a view of theirs. "Would you like to see a menu, ma'am?" the waiter asked after I was seated. Just coffee for now, I replied, angling my chair for a better view while trying to appear casual. From my position, I could catch fragments of their conversation. The man, whom Elaine called Victor, leaned forward with an concerned expression. "How much longer do we need to keep this up?" he asked, his voice carrying during a lull in the ambient noise. "The Thompson boy is asking questions about the property values." Elaine placed her hand over his. "Just until we get the house. Their marriage is already falling apart. He'll sign anything I put in front of him now. He trusts me completely." Nearly knocked over my coffee. There was no mistaking her meaning, yet it seemed so outlandish that part of me still questioned if I'd heard correctly. After they finished their lunch, I watched them leave together, heading toward the elevators. Rather than the exit, I waited in the lobby for nearly 2 hours, using the hotel's Wi-Fi to research Victor based on physical descriptions and snippets of conversation I'd overheard. A social media search yielded results. Victor Renard, real estate developer, specializing in luxury property conversions. His company website showed him standing proudly in front of several historic homes transformed into upscale condominiums, homes not unlike ours, a Victorian with prime location and historical significance. Elaine finally emerged alone. She looked flushed and radiant, nothing like a woman suffering from terminal cancer. I slipped out before she could spot me, my mind racing with implications. The next day, I brought homemade cookies to Dr. Catherine Lynn's house under the pretense of neighborly friendship. "These look delicious," Catherine said, inviting me in. "Perfect timing. I just made fresh coffee." Over steaming mugs, I carefully steered the conversation toward her work. "Hypothetically," I began, "would it be possible for someone with stage 4 pancreatic cancer to show no physical symptoms after 3 months of treatment? No weight loss, no jaundice, actually gaining weight?" Catherine frowned. "That would be extraordinarily unlikely. Pancreatic cancer is aggressive, and stage 4 means it's already spread beyond the pancreas. The treatments themselves cause significant side effects: hair loss, extreme fatigue, weight loss. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I said lightly. "A friend's relative is going through it, and they mentioned how surprising it was that the person seemed so well." "Every case is different," Catherine conceded, "but I'd be very skeptical of that scenario. The 5-year survival rate for stage 4 pancreatic cancer is less than 3%, and those patients generally show obvious signs of illness throughout treatment." With mounting certainty, I made my next move, hiring a private investigator. Thomas Parker, a former police detective with gray at his temples and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened carefully to my suspicions in his small office downtown. "You understand? This is a serious accusation," he said when I finished. "Faking cancer for financial gain would be fraud, potentially grand larceny depending on the amounts involved." "I understand," I replied, "but I need to know the truth before confronting my husband. He worships his mother. He'd never believe me without irrefutable proof." Thomas nodded. "I'll need a retainer and some basic information: her full name, date of birth, the cancer center's details." Within a week, Thomas called with preliminary findings. "Elaine Bennett has no medical records at St. Mary's Cancer Center," he reported. "However, she does have a recurring appointment at Glendale Cosmetic Surgery under the name Elaine Benson. Same date of birth, same social security number." "Cosmetic surgery?" I repeated numbly. "Facial treatments, primarily. And there's more. Victor Renard has a history of property fraud. 3 separate charges, though he was only convicted once, back in 2018. He served 6 months in a minimum security facility." "And their connection?" "They've been romantically linked for just over 2 years, according to social media and witness statements, well before her supposed cancer diagnosis. My suspicions confirmed, I began a systematic investigation of our home." In Elaine's guest house, hidden beneath carefully folded sweaters, I found a notebook containing meticulous records of our home's features, estimated value, and potential conversion opportunities. More disturbing were the missing items I'd cataloged: my grandmother's pearls, James's rare first edition Hemingway, the vintage watch I'd given him for our 5th anniversary, all listed in the notebook with estimated values and potential buyers. Our financial records revealed an even more alarming picture. James had taken out a second mortgage on our home, $350,000 supposedly for Elaine's experimental treatments. Bank transfers showed the money moving to an offshore account connected to a shell company. Thomas confirmed the company was registered to Victor Renard. With trembling hands, I installed additional hidden cameras throughout our house, in the living room bookshelf, disguised as a clock radio in the kitchen, concealed in an air freshener in the hallway. Unlike the nanny cam James had forgotten, these were connected to my private cloud account, accessible only through my secure phone. For 3 days, the cameras recorded nothing unusual. Then, on the 4th day, while James and I were both at work, they captured Elaine bringing Victor into our home. They walked through each room, discussing renovation possibilities and estimated profits. The master bedroom would make an excellent sitting room for the penthouse unit, Victor said, running his hand along our bedroom wall. We could take out this wall, open it up to the view. The renovations will need to wait until after Christmas, Elaine replied. That's when the transfer will be complete, once the divorce is finalized. Are you sure he'll go through with it? Victor asked. Men can be sentimental about marriages, even bad ones. Elaine laughed coldly. Trust me, he'll sign. I've been carefully building the narrative that she's unstable, resentful of his success, jealous of his relationship with me. The recordings I've made of their arguments edit beautifully to support my version. They moved to the kitchen, where Victor opened our refrigerator and helped himself to a beer, James's favorite craft brew. We should accelerate the timeline, he suggested. I've acquired some substances that are virtually untraceable. They mimic symptoms of anxiety, paranoia, even psychosis when administered regularly. A few drops in her evening tea, and within weeks, she'll appear completely unstable. Perfect, Elaine said, her voice chillingly casual. Keep playing the dying act, and we'll have their house by Christmas. The neighborhood is gentrifying quickly. Property values will double in 5 years. And with James's power of attorney, I can liquidate his firm's assets too. The final damning evidence came when Victor asked about James's long-term role in their plan. What about your son? Once we have the property and his assets. Elaine's expression hardened. Once I'm the sole beneficiary of his will, we'll revisit that question. There are accidents that raise no suspicions when they happen to grieving, emotionally unstable men. I watched the footage 3 times, each viewing revealing new, horrifying details of their scheme. This wasn't just about our home. Elaine and Victor were planning something far more sinister, with James as much a victim as I was. With shaking hands, I downloaded all the evidence to an encrypted drive and called Thomas. I have everything we need, I told him. But we need to move carefully. They're planning to drug me, and possibly worse. Don't confront them alone, Thomas warned. And don't eat or drink anything she prepares. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring the evidence. We'll develop a strategy. That night, I lay awake beside James, watching him sleep peacefully, unaware that the mother he adored was plotting not just against me, but potentially against his life. How could I make him see the truth without destroying him in the process? The answer came unexpectedly. While searching for additional evidence in Elaine's guest house during her supposed support group meeting, I discovered a bottle of prescription pills hidden in a false-bottom jewelry box. The label bore a psychiatrist's name and instructions for treating severe anxiety, but the prescription was in my name, not Elaine's. A quick call to the pharmacy confirmed my suspicion. The prescription was fraudulent. I'd never visited the psychiatrist listed, but someone had used my identification to obtain powerful anti-anxiety medication. Medication that, when administered without knowledge, could indeed cause symptoms of mental instability. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture more disturbing than I'd imagined. I needed to move quickly, before Elaine and Victor's plan progressed further, before James was manipulated into signing away everything he'd worked for, and before I was painted as too unstable to be believed. Armed with evidence that would shatter my husband's world, I planned my approach carefully. I prepared a special dinner, James's favorite roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, and selected a bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. My plan was to create a moment of connection before delivering the devastating truth. Spent the afternoon organizing my evidence: photos of Elaine with Victor, financial statements showing the diverted funds, video clips of their conversations in our home. I stored everything on a tablet and rehearsed what I would say, trying to find words that would minimize James's pain while still conveying the gravity of his mother's deception. But Elaine had anticipated me. When James arrived home, his expression was already thunderous. He stormed into the kitchen where I was putting finishing touches on dinner. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, slapping a stack of papers onto the counter. I recognized them immediately: printouts of cancer symptoms and treatment effects I'd researched, along with notes comparing Elaine's behavior to typical patient experiences. I'd hidden them in my desk drawer, which now stood partially open in our home office. "You've been building a case against my mother?" James's voice trembled with rage. "Trying to prove she's lying about dying of cancer? What kind of monster are you?" "James, please listen." "No, you listen." He stepped closer, his face flushed. "My therapist warned me this might happen. She said sometimes spouses become irrationally jealous of the attention given to terminally ill family members." My mind reeled. "Your therapist? You've been discussing this with your therapist?" "Of course I have." "You've been acting increasingly paranoid, watching my mother, questioning her medical care." "It's sick, Emily. It's honestly sick." I reached for the tablet. "I have proof, James. Just look at—" A crash from the hallway interrupted me. We both turned to see Elaine clutching the door frame, her face contorted in what appeared to be pain. She slumped dramatically to the floor. "Mom!" James rushed to her side, cradling her head. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm sorry," she gasped weakly. "I overheard you arguing. The stress. It triggered something. The doctor warned about seizures as the cancer progresses." James shot me an accusatory glare as he helped Elaine to the sofa. "See what you've done? Are you happy now?" I grabbed my tablet, fingers trembling as I tried to unlock it. "James, please, just look at what I found." But when I opened the folder containing my evidence, it was empty. The videos, photos, financial records, all gone. Frantically, I checked my backup files, but they too had been wiped clean. "There's nothing there because you've invented this whole conspiracy," James said coldly, watching my panic. "You need help, Emily." That night, as James slept in the guest room beside his mother, I checked my laptop. Every piece of evidence I'd collected had been systematically erased. Whoever had done it, Elaine or Victor, was thorough and technically skilled. The next morning, I found James in the kitchen, his expression grim. Without a word, he placed his phone on the table and played an audio recording. I heard my voice, taken from different arguments over the past months, stitched together to create a disturbing narrative. "Your mother is lying. I don't believe she has cancer. We're wasting money on her. Maybe it would be better if she just died already." I stared at him in horror. "That's not what I said. Those are pieces from different conversations taken completely out of context." "I've been recording our arguments," James admitted, his voice flat. "Initially just to replay them and figure out how to communicate better. But now I'm glad I did. If you don't get help, Emily, I'll use these to demonstrate your declining mental state to a judge if necessary." My blood ran cold. "You'd take legal action against me? If it means protecting my mother during her final months?" "Yes." His eyes, once filled with love, now regarded me as a stranger. I've spoken with our lawyer about options. Later that day, I contacted Thomas Parker again, desperate for the copies of evidence he'd surely kept. I still have everything, he confirmed during our hurried meeting at a coffee shop. But there's something else you should know. Victor Renard has been making inquiries about me, asking contacts in the police department about my current cases. They know I've hired you, I realized aloud. Thomas nodded grimly. Be careful. These aren't amateurs. As I left the coffee shop, I witnessed Thomas being approached by 2 police officers. Through the window, I watched in horror as they handcuffed him and led him to a waiting patrol car. The next day, the local paper ran a small article about a private investigator arrested for allegedly hacking private medical records. Thomas Parker's name and photo were prominently featured. My isolation deepened. I tried calling Thomas's office but received no answer. His bail had been set prohibitively high, according to the court records I accessed online. Increasingly desperate, I began testing my evening tea for unusual substances. Using a home drug testing kit purchased discreetly online, I confirmed my suspicion. The tea Elaine insisted on preparing for me each night contained traces of benzodiazepines, powerful anti-anxiety medication that could cause drowsiness, confusion, and impaired coordination. No wonder I'd been feeling increasingly foggy, struggling to concentrate at work, finding it difficult to articulate my thoughts clearly. For weeks, possibly months, Elaine had been drugging me, building a case for my mental instability while simultaneously causing it. My boss, Michael, called me into his office the following week. "Emily, is everything okay at home?" he asked, concern evident in his furrowed brow. "Why do you ask?" I replied cautiously. "You've missed 3 important deadlines. Your reports contain unusual errors, and clients have mentioned you seem distracted during meetings." He hesitated. "Also, we've received several calls from a woman identifying herself as your mother-in-law, expressing concern about your well-being. She mentioned you might be experiencing psychological issues." Fury and fear battled within me. "She's been calling my workplace?" Michael nodded uncomfortably. "She seemed genuinely concerned. Said your husband is at his wit's end but didn't want to embarrass you by calling himself." I returned to my desk, hands shaking. They were systematically dismantling my life, my marriage, my career, my credibility. Soon there would be nothing left. The final blow came when I arrived home early one Thursday afternoon, having left work after another disastrous meeting where I'd struggled to focus. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car, parked outside, a luxury sedan with tinted windows. Entering quietly through the side door, I heard voices from our dining room. James, Elaine, and a third voice I didn't recognize. Peering around the corner, I saw them seated around our table with a man in an expensive suit, documents spread before them. "The conservatorship would be temporary," the man was saying. "Given the documented evidence of erratic behavior and the potential self-harm risk, the court typically grants these petitions when filed by a spouse. And it would give me complete control over our finances and her medical decisions?" James asked, his voice hollow. "Yes. We could also pursue involuntary psychiatric evaluation if necessary." I stepped into the doorway. Planning my commitment. "James?" All 3 heads whipped toward me. The man, clearly our family lawyer, Gregory Wilson, had the grace to look embarrassed. "Emily, this isn't what it looks like," James began. "It looks exactly like what it is," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "You're plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent based on symptoms your mother has been causing by drugging my tea every night." Elaine gasped dramatically. "How dare you? James, do you see how paranoid she's become?" Gregory gathered his papers awkwardly. "Perhaps I should come back another time." Once he'd left, the argument exploded with a fury that had been building for months. Every accusation I made was countered by Elaine's tears and James's increasing anger. When I mentioned the drugged tea, James demanded I prove it. I already took samples to be tested, I lied. The results will be ready tomorrow. A flicker of alarm crossed Elaine's face, so brief anyone else would have missed it. That night, I packed a bag while James was in the shower. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. It wasn't safe. As I zipped the suitcase, James appeared in the doorway, hair still damp. "You're leaving?" His voice was equal parts anger and disbelief. "I can't stay here anymore," I said simply. "So that's it? 10 years of marriage, and you just walk away because you can't handle my mother being sick?" I looked at the man I'd loved for so long, wondering how he could be so blind. "I'm not leaving because your mother is sick, James. I'm leaving because she's not." His face hardened. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to take anything with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out our prenuptial agreement, signed the week before our wedding when his architectural firm was just beginning to succeed. With deliberate movements, he tore it in half, then quarters. "You want out? Fine. But you'll get nothing." I shouldered my bag, containing only clothes and personal items. "I never wanted your money, James. I only wanted you." As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. "Check the kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator. I've installed cameras throughout the house, ones Elaine doesn't know about. The truth is there if you're brave enough to face it." I didn't wait to see his reaction. As I pulled away in my car, I saw Elaine watching from the window, her expression unreadable in the darkness. From Rebecca's modest one-bedroom apartment across town, I began piecing my life back together. My childhood friend had welcomed me without hesitation, setting up a makeshift bed on her sofa and providing the emotional support I desperately needed. "You can stay as long as necessary," she assured me, pouring another glass of wine. "But we need a plan. These people sound dangerous, Em." I nodded, opening Rebecca's laptop. "First, I need to recover my evidence. Using her computer rather than my potentially compromised devices, I accessed my cloud storage's recovery system. While Elaine or Victor had deleted the files, they hadn't emptied the digital trash, a crucial oversight. One by one, I restored the videos, photos, and financial records. As I reviewed the footage again, I discovered something I'd missed previously. In one video, Elaine and Victor discussed similar schemes they'd run on 3 other families. "The Cho Williams case was cleaner," Victor was saying in the footage. "No private investigator, no suspicious wife." "That ended badly," Elaine responded. "I didn't expect Thomas to kill himself when Charlotte left him. But we got the property," Victor shrugged. "And the Anderson divorce went perfectly. Husband completely believed his wife was unfaithful." "Diane Anderson almost ruined everything with those police reports," Elaine countered. "We need to be more careful this time." Rebecca stared at the screen in horror. "They've done this before? Multiple times?" "Apparently so." I rubbed my temples. "I need to find these people, especially Diane Anderson. They could corroborate my story." My next call was to Elaine's brother, Robert. I'd only met him briefly at that family dinner, but I remembered he'd seemed genuinely confused by his sister's healthy appearance. "This is going to sound crazy," I began when he answered. "Actually, it doesn't," Robert interrupted after I'd explained my suspicions. "Elaine has always been manipulative. When our parents were aging, she tried something similar, convinced our father that our mother was mismanaging their finances, and nearly got him to transfer everything to accounts only Elaine could access." "You believe me?" I asked, my voice breaking with relief. "Let's just say nothing would surprise me where my sister is concerned. What can I do to help?" With Robert's assistance, I located Diane Anderson, the woman Elaine and Victor had mentioned in their conversation. Now living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, Diane was initially reluctant to speak with me. "I've moved on with my life," she said, standing in her doorway without inviting me in. "Dredging up the past won't change anything." "It might stop them from destroying another family," I countered. "Please, Just hear me out. Over coffee at a nearby diner, Diane's story emerged, painfully similar to my own. Victor had befriended her husband through a business association, while Elaine had insinuated herself into their lives during a difficult period. She played the supportive friend, Diane recalled bitterly, always available to listen to Brian's complaints about our marriage, always taking his side. Meanwhile, Victor was convincing Brian I was having an affair with my boss. They created evidence, I guessed. Diane nodded. Doctored photos, fake emails, even a recorded phone conversation that wasn't actually me. By the time I realized what was happening, Brian had filed for divorce and signed over our historic home to a property management company to spite me. She laughed humorlessly. 3 months later, that company, owned by Victor, sold it for triple what Brian got for it. Will you help me? I asked. Make a statement? Testify if necessary? Diane hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, it's time someone stopped them. Armed with recovered evidence and Diane's testimony, I consulted Angela Friedman, a lawyer specializing in fraud cases. In her downtown office, decorated with framed law degrees and family photos, she reviewed my materials with increasing alarm. This is one of the most elaborate fraud schemes I've seen, she remarked, organizing documents into neat piles. The good news is you have substantial evidence. The bad news is timing. We need to move carefully. If we act prematurely, they could destroy evidence or flee. My husband is completely under their influence, I explained. I'm worried about what they might convince him to do with our assets. I'll file for an emergency injunction freezing your joint accounts, Angela promised. Meanwhile, keep gathering evidence, particularly anything showing your mother-in-law isn't actually receiving cancer treatment. Working with Rebecca, I devised a plan to apply pressure on Victor directly. Using her connections at the local newspaper where she worked in advertising, Rebecca arranged for a business reporter to investigate Victor's real estate dealings, specifically properties acquired through divorce settlements. The resulting article, though carefully worded to avoid libel, raised serious questions about Victor's business practices and the surprising pattern of distressed properties he'd acquired. It mentioned no names but described circumstances similar enough to put him on notice. The hidden cameras I'd left in our house captured the aftermath. Victor arrived at our home in a rage, waving the newspaper article. "This is about us!" he shouted, at Elaine. "Someone's asking questions, connecting the properties. We need to accelerate the timeline." "We can't rush this," Elaine insisted. "The house isn't legally secured yet. If we push too hard, we could lose everything." "I don't care about finesse anymore," Victor snapped. "We've got the banks asking questions about those loan applications. Either we finish this now, or I'm cutting my losses." Their argument escalated, revealing cracks in their partnership that hadn't been visible before. Victor wanted immediate results, while Elaine counseled patience, a division I could potentially exploit. Meanwhile, I discovered another disturbing element of their scheme. Checking James's email remotely, using the password he'd never changed, I found correspondence between him and his therapist. However, examining the email headers revealed that several messages supposedly from the therapist had actually originated from an account accessed on our home network during hours when James was at work. Elaine had been intercepting and fabricating therapeutic advice, manipulating James's perception of both his mental health and my behavior. I forwarded the evidence to Dr. Sarah Williams, James's actual therapist. "This is deeply disturbing," Dr. Williams responded. "Not only is it fraud, but potentially causing significant psychological harm to my patient. I need to address this with James immediately." "Please don't," I begged in my reply. "If you confront him directly, he'll tell his mother, and she'll just create another explanation. I need your help to clarify the situation when the time is right." Dr. Williams reluctantly agreed to wait, but insisted we move quickly for James's psychological well-being. The final pieces fell into place when my lawyer secured a court order for Elaine's actual medical records. records that confirmed she had never been diagnosed with any form of cancer. We also obtained financial documentation showing the money from James's second mortgage flowing directly into Victor's offshore business ventures. Most damning of all was a call I received from Dr. Patricia Foster, a physician who identified herself as Elaine's actual doctor. "Ms. Wilson, I'm contacting you because I'm concerned about prescription fraud," she explained. "Someone has been using your mother-in-law's name to obtain medications, specifically psychiatric medications under fraudulent circumstances. Given your address is listed on these prescriptions, I wanted to speak with you directly." "What medications specifically?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Primarily benzodiazepines and certain antipsychotics, medications that would cause significant cognitive impairment and emotional instability if administered without knowledge or proper dosing. The very drugs I'd found traces of in my evening tea." With all evidence compiled, I arranged a meeting with James at his office, away from Elaine's influence. His business partner, Martin, who had become increasingly concerned about James's decision-making, helped secure a private conference room and promised to keep Elaine away if she appeared. "She's called here 6 times this week," Martin confided as he escorted me in. "Always with some emergency requiring James to come home immediately. We've lost 2 major clients because of missed meetings." James looked exhausted when he entered. Dark circles under his eyes and his normally immaculate appearance decidedly rumpled. He stopped short seeing me. "What are you doing here? I have nothing to say to you." "Please, just give me 15 minutes, I said. "After that, if you still want me to leave, I will." Reluctantly, he sat across from me as I connected my laptop to the room's projector. I started with the financial evidence, bank statements showing the diverted treatment money flowing to Victor's accounts, followed by property records revealing Victor's pattern of acquiring homes through suspicious circumstances. James watched, in stony silence, his jaw tightening, but giving no indication whether he believed what he was seeing. "Your mother has never been diagnosed with cancer," I continued, displaying the court-ordered medical records. "These are her actual medical files, James. The only treatments she's received in the past year have been cosmetic procedures at Glendale Clinic." "These could be faked," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then explain this," I replied, playing the video of Elaine and Victor in our bedroom, discussing renovation plans and the timeline for after the divorce. The color drained from James's face as he watched his mother, supposedly weakened by chemotherapy, energetically pointing out structural features of our home to her lover. But it was the next clip that finally broke through his denial. Elaine sat at our kitchen table with Victor, laughing as she played the edited recordings of my voice. "Listen to how perfect this sounds," she was saying. "James actually believes she said these things. He's so pathetically eager to defend me, he never even questioned it." Victor chuckled. "What about afterward, once we have the property?" My poor, grieving son? Elaine's smile was chilling. "Accidents happen to people in emotional distress all the time, and as his only living relative, I'll inherit everything." James's hand covered his mouth, his eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. "This can't be real." "I'm so sorry," I said, softly. "I know how much you love her. That's why she was able to manipulate you so effectively." He sat in silence for several long minutes after the video ended, staring at the frozen image of his mother's cold smile. "She's been drugging my tea," I explained gently. "The same medications she had prescribed fraudulently in my name. That's why I've seemed unstable, forgetful, emotional." Finally, James looked up, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I believed her completely. I defended her against you, my wife." His voice broke. "I was ready to have you committed, Emily." "What kind of person does that make me?" "It makes you someone who loved his mother and couldn't imagine she would betray that love," I answered, reaching for his hand across the table. After discussing our options with my lawyer, we developed a plan to gather irrefutable evidence of Elaine and Victor's criminal intent. James agreed to help, though the pain of his mother's betrayal was visibly crushing him. "I need to see it with my own eyes," he insisted. "Hear it from her own mouth with no possibility of misinterpretation." The plan was simple but effective. James told Elaine he needed to attend a 3-day architectural conference in Chicago. A deliberate lie. Instead, he helped install additional recording equipment throughout the house, focusing on areas where Elaine typically held her private conversations. On the morning of his supposed departure, I watched from Rebecca's apartment as James hugged his mother goodbye in our driveway. His performance was convincing, the dutiful son still concerned about leaving his ill mother, despite arranging for a nurse to check in daily. Once alone in the house, Elaine wasted no time inviting Victor over. The cameras captured their celebratory mood as they opened an expensive bottle of champagne from our cellar. "To almost being rid of her," Elaine toasted, clinking glasses with Victor. "James will file for divorce as soon as he returns. I've already drafted the papers." "And he suspects nothing?" Victor asked, settling comfortably into James's favorite chair. "Not a thing," Elaine laughed. "He's like his father, so trusting it's actually pathetic. Once we have the house, the firm's assets will be next. His partnership agreement has a vulnerability I've already identified." They proceeded to discuss in explicit detail their entire scheme, including plans that shocked even me. Elaine had researched untraceable poisons that could mimic heart failure, intended for James after the property transfer was complete. "Grief-stricken mother loses both son and daughter-in-law within months," Elaine mused, refilling their glasses. "The community will rally around me. No one will question when I sell this place and move somewhere warm." From my laptop, I could see James watching the live stream from a hotel room across town. His face was ashen, tears streaming unchecked as he witnessed the mother he adored planning his murder with casual indifference. When they began discussing specific methods for eliminating James, detailing how to make it appear as a suicide triggered by our divorce, I made the call. Within minutes, police officers arrived with search and arrest warrants, catching Elaine and Victor still holding their champagne glasses. "What is the meaning of this?" Elaine demanded, instantly shifting into her frail cancer patient persona. The lead detective, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Karen Foster, was unmoved. "Elaine Bennett, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, prescription fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." "This is ridiculous. I'm a sick woman," Elaine protested as officers handcuffed her. "My son will clear this up immediately. This is all my unstable daughter-in-law's doing." "Actually, Mrs. Bennett," Detective Foster replied coolly, "your son is the one who signed the complaint. And we have the entire conversation you just had on video, including your plans for his death." The mask finally slipped. Elaine's face contorted with rage as she was led to the police car, screaming obscenities and threats. Victor, meanwhile, immediately began offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency. "Elaine masterminded everything," he insisted to the officers. "I have documentation of 3 previous cases, similar schemes. I was just following her lead." James returned home that evening, looking shell-shocked and broken. Without a word, he walked into my arms and held me for what seemed like hours. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me," he whispered against my hair. "There's nothing to forgive," I replied. "She manipulated you your entire life. She knew exactly which buttons to push." The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed given the evidence. Elaine and Victor faced multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and attempted murder. Victor's cooperation, while self-serving, provided authorities with details of their previous victims, helping to build cases for them as well. In the aftermath, James fell into a deep depression, struggling to reconcile the mother he thought he knew with the calculating criminal revealed in the investigation. Through therapy with Dr. Williams, the real Dr. Williams, he began recognizing patterns of manipulation dating back to his childhood. "She convinced me my father abandoned us," he told me one night. "But I found letters in her things. Dozens of them." He had been trying to maintain a relationship with me for years. She returned them all, telling him I wanted nothing to do with him. Our marriage hung by a thread as we attempted to rebuild trust through couples counseling. The therapist helped us recognize how Elaine had systematically exploited existing weaknesses in our relationship, particularly James's tendency to avoid conflict and my reluctance to push issues when he became defensive. 6 months later, we attended the sentencing hearing together. Elaine and Victor received lengthy prison terms for multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, attempted poisoning, and elder abuse from previous schemes. Elaine remained defiant to the end, refusing to acknowledge James in the courtroom despite his presence at every hearing. Victor, desperate for leniency, provided testimony that helped secure justice for Diane Anderson and other previous victims. The restitution payments would never fully compensate for the emotional damage they'd caused, but they represented some measure of accountability. 1 year after Elaine's arrival in our home, James and I finally took our delayed anniversary trip to Paris. The city was everything we'd dreamed of. The Seine glittering with lights, the Eiffel Tower illuminating the night sky, cafes filled with music and laughter. On our final evening, James led me to the tower's observation deck just as the sun was setting. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box containing a new wedding ring. "I had this made to replace the one I gave you 10 years ago," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "That ring belongs to a marriage where I failed to put you first, where I didn't trust you when it mattered most." Alongside the ring was a document, a new prenuptial agreement, this one heavily in my favor. "If you still want to be married to me, I want you to know that I'm committed to rebuilding what my mother almost destroyed." As I slipped the ring onto my finger, I knew our path forward wouldn't be easy. The scars of betrayal would take years to fully heal, and James would always carry the wound of his mother's ultimate deception. But standing there, with the lights of Paris spread before us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. "I do still want to be married to you," I said, leaning into his embrace. "We're stronger now. We know what to watch for. No one will ever come between us again." Above us, the stars emerged one by one, witnesses to our renewed commitment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, wiser, more vigilant, but still capable of the love that had brought us together a decade ago, before cancer and deception, before betrayal and redemption, when we were simply two people promising to build a life side by side. What would you sacrifice to uncover a deadly truth when even those closest to you refuse to see it? Sometimes the most dangerous deceptions come from those we're taught to trust without question. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories of survival against impossible odds, where ordinary people discover extraordinary strength when everything is at stake.